Storytime when I accidentally exposed a customer's affair to his wife. I work in a call center. It's no career, but it's a pretty nice job with some decent people and it's easy. All we do really is facilitate switches for people looking for better deals on household stuff, usually their internet provider or supplier of gas and electricity. We have agents in the field who make sales, then call us for verification with the customer. Simple, right? Not today. See, usually it's company policy not to do callbacks. Nobody wants annoying call center calls, right? So unless a customer specifically requests a scheduled callback, we just don't do them. I had a customer 2 days ago looking for a pretty pricey internet switch. He was going from a basic setup to a full TV, phone, internet package, which was coming over to $100 a month. I informed the customer, who's an impatient sounding guy, that because of the price increase, he'll need to have a quick credit check run on him and it'll mean that the call takes a little longer. The guy gets all pissed about being busy and saying that he can't waste all afternoon on the phone with some call center. So would it be alright if I called him after the weekend to go through it then? Seems straightforward enough. I scheduled a call and asked if there was a specific time he wanted me to call. He says anytime is fine and follows with, if Emily answers, just ask her for me, she'll make sure I get the phone, and gave me a home phone number. Fast forward to today and I make a grave error. See, the application I had from the customer had his home phone number already filled in, which it turns out it was not the same number he'd given me for today's callback. I called the number I thought was correct and a woman answers. I say without thinking, "Oh, hi, I'm calling for Steve to confirm his broadband switch. We spoke the other day. You must be Emily." Cue uncomfortable pause. She says, "This is Steve's wife, Amanda." "What do you mean I must be Emily?" I apologized and said, "I'm so sorry. When I spoke to him the other day, he said if an Emily answered to just ask for Steve." And she just goes, "I fucking knew it. I fucking knew it," and slammed the phone down. After checking the application against the post-it note, I jotted some info down on the other day and I realized that Steve must have given me the number for where he was going to be today, and I'd instead called his unsuspecting wife at home. Angry Steve ended up calling my workplace. He put in complaints and tried to get me fired. However, it turns out that when an application is put through by an agent, it must be the applicant's own details. So I was only technically allowed to call the wife anyway, not Emily's phone number as he gave me. If he wanted the call to be a different number, he would have had to have a new application submitted with revised details. It wasn't enough just to give me a different number over the phone. So in the end, I got a write-up, but I didn't lose my job.
Am I wrong for refusing to give up my dream wedding dress, even though it means my fiance's family won't attend? I'm in a lot of turmoil right now, and it feels like everything is falling apart. I have never had a great relationship with my future mother-in-law. It isn't terrible, but I can sense that she doesn't like me. My fiance is very close to his family, so there has been some tension. I didn't invite my mother-in-law wedding dress shopping because our relationship was awkward, but I thought I'd show her a picture to make her feel included. My dress is a beautiful, flowery, beachy dress, but not technically a wedding dress and could be ordered in color. I bought it from a small local boutique that we both love. My mother-in-law said that I can't wear that dress because she bought the same one for her 50th birthday, which is 2 weeks after my wedding. My mother-in-law does have the dress though in a mint green color. There is enough detailing that is still clearly the same dress. And she has a receipt to prove that she got it first. Lavish birthday parties are a thing in our circle, so I know she has invested serious time and money. I said that I'm still going to wear the dress, despite the fact I could easily return it with no loss, because I didn't do this out of malice and I love it. She said if she wears it 2 weeks after I do, everyone is going to think she is pathetic in copying her son's wife. I said sorry, but not really my problem. Everyone has gone crazy since I said that. His entire side of the family has backed out of the wedding, so like 15 people, and it will be noticeable. His sisters were supposed to be in the wedding party on his side, but dropped out and have blocked him on everything. His stepdad won't talk to him and says he regrets raising him and he isn't a real man because a real man would stand up for his mom. My fiancé is hurting and found out his family had a big beach day and invited everyone but him. He called mother-in-law and they talked but didn't come to a resolution. She said if I refuse to do the right thing, the only answer is no one going to her party can go to the wedding. He is now mad at me, saying that my mother-in-law had the dress first. So am I wrong here? I don't want to give up my dream wedding dress.
Here's the story time you guys been waiting for. Do you guys remember my story time with Oliver and my client? My client's appointment was last week. She came over for her appointment. We sat down, we chatted, we made a joke about the door. I asked her about how her baby and her boyfriend's doing. She said her baby's been great, but her and her boyfriend have been having a rough time. As I'm starting her set, she's telling me about how her boyfriend's been distant and moody and how he hasn't been around much lately. I feel really bad for her, and I'm listening, but I'm also kind of waiting for this phone call. Finally, my phone rings. I purposely answer it on speakerphone, and it's Oliver. Oliver answers the phone, and his phone's on speaker. I can tell by the sound he's in the car, and he asks me if I'm busy tonight. I tell him I'm finishing up this set real quick, and I can meet him later on. Then he tells me that he's bringing someone out tonight, and I'll never guess who it is. And right as I'm about to say who, you hear another voice go, "It's me." I look up at my client, and my client looks back at me, and I can tell she knows it's her man. As I say hey back to her man, she's staring at me, and I could tell that she assumes he's there to hook up with me, so I quickly say, "Oh, Oliver, is that your date for tonight?" Both the guys laugh, and Oliver says, "Yeah, of course." My client snatches her hand away. I quickly mute my phone as she says, "Is that my man?" Right as I'm about to answer her, Oliver says, "Meet me at AJ Gator's at 7 o'clock. I unmute my phone, and then I tell Oliver, "Okay, I'll be there," and quickly hang up. That's when I realize that I'm sitting here alone with this girl who just realized her man is cheating on her with my friend. She was furious, and I could tell, so I take a deep breath and I tell her everything that's going on. I let her know that Oliver is involved and that he does know what's going on and he's willing to help set her man up. After I told her everything, she was definitely down. So I finish up her set, and as she's leaving, I tell her to meet me back here at 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock comes around and she comes back dressed up like a baddie. She's got her nails done, her hair done, her eyelashes done. She's looking bomb. Now me, I had on sweatpants because I thought this was going to be a different type of night. But regardless, we hopped in her car and we headed up to AJ Gators. We pull up and I see Oliver's car in the parking lot. And through the glass window, I can see them standing super close by the pool table. So on the way there, she's telling me about how she doesn't really want to start a bunch of drama or cause a big scene. And I completely understand because we should never fight over a man. So we walk into the bar and her boyfriend is facing the opposite direction, but Oliver and me make eye contact. As we're walking in, we see her boyfriend shooting his shot in the right corner pocket on the pool table, and she walks smooth right past him. He completely misses his shot and looks up at her. He calls out her name and she just keeps walking to the bar. As I'm following behind her, we sit up at the bar and these two guys come and sit next to us. They immediately ask us our names and ask us if we want to drink with them. She immediately says yes, of course, and then orders a drink. Oliver laughs and looks at his now ex-boyfriend and says to him, "I hope you have that Uber app because you're definitely not riding with me." Oliver comes over and joins us and we watch her boyfriend awkwardly leave the restaurant. I guess he went out front to order an Uber home, but my client just turns around and orders a pitcher of beer for the table. I don't drink beer, but I sit back and I get ready to have a fun night. But as soon as that beer pitcher hits the table, she snatches it up. And she immediately walks right out the restaurant and pours that entire pitcher of beer on her now ex-boyfriend's head. Now mind y'all, it's freezing cold outside. So I know he was hurt. But my client walks right back into the bar and we just enjoy the rest of our night.
Story time about how I got caught hooking up with my stepson. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My husband actually cheated on his wife with me. I started working at his company when I was 18. We started an affair and I knew it was wrong, but at the time I was very broke. He offered me a wealthy lifestyle and believe it or not, we fell in love. So when he and I got married, I was still 18. He was much older than me. He was 42. Everyone in town, of course, started hating me because I broke up the family. His wife couldn't even see my face. My husband already had 2 kids when we got married. One was 12, one was 15. So they were much closer in age to me than he was. The kids and I got along super well. I was their cool stepmom and we had a lot of fun. When I turned 20, the oldest boy came to live with us. And I think you already know what happens. My husband was always traveling for work. That means my stepson and I would be home alone most of the time. One night we decided to watch a movie and before I knew it, we were making out on the couch. From then, we basically started an affair behind my husband's back. Part 2 is up. Part 2 about how I got caught hooking up with my stepson. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So like I said, my husband was always traveling for work. So my stepson and I would be alone in the house a lot. One night we were watching a movie and it just happened. After that, we couldn't get enough of each other. He even started skipping class so that he could spend more time with me. We basically turned into boyfriend and girlfriend when my husband wasn't there. When my husband would come home from his work trips, we would pretend like everything was normal. One day after my husband got back from one of his work trips, he found one of his son's socks in our bed. He asked me how it got there, but I told him it probably got stuck in there while I was washing the sheets. A few months passed by and my stepson and I are still hooking up. This is when I realized that I hadn't gotten my period in a few months. My period was always irregular, so I didn't think anything of it. My stepson went to the pharmacy to get me a pregnancy test. It came out positive. But the big problem is that my husband can't have children anymore. How was I going to explain this to my husband when he couldn't have kids? Part 3 is up. Part 3 about how I got caught hooking up with my stepson. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My stepson and I take the pregnancy test and it turns out it was positive. Well, I told my stepson that his dad wasn't able to have kids anymore. That's when he really flipped out. Then he tells me we should just tell his dad the truth. I told him let's not do anything until we actually confirm that I'm pregnant. We go to the doctor the next day and it turns out I'm not pregnant. But this made me realize that we needed to end the affair. Once we got home, I told him we needed to break things off. He begged me not to and we went to his bedroom. Not even 2 minutes later, his mother walks in. She catches us on his bed. She nearly has a heart attack, calls his dad and tells him everything. She took him out of the house and told me never to see him again. When my husband came back from his trip, he made me promise not to see my stepson again. I told him we should get a divorce, but he said no. Then he confessed to me that he's been having an affair too. Now he doesn't even let me leave the house anymore. I want a divorce. What should I do?
Story time on how I hid in my boyfriend's closet and watched him get nasty with my best friend. Okay, so boom, I'ma jump right into this one. So me and my boyfriend been together for 1 year and my best friend was the one who got us together. In the beginning, me and my boyfriend were in the honeymoon stage and I couldn't get enough of him, child. And meanwhile, my best friend was hating and started to get jealous. She started giving me attitude when I would call her. She started avoiding me when I would ask to go out. And she started to text me way less. So I took it as her trying to distance herself from me. I cried to her, telling her she's my best friend and I don't want to lose her. Then we got back to being okay. Fast forward a couple months to the stage me and my boyfriend relationship is at now. Yeah, now he's acting funny. He's not talking to me as much. He's always distracted on his phone when I'm with him. And he started making excuses on why I almost never see him. Well, I'm crazy. And I was going to find out exactly what's going on. So I took his keys. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how I hid in my boyfriend's closet and watched him get nasty with my best friend. Okay, so boom, like I said, I'm crazy. And my boyfriend was acting funny, so I was going to get to the bottom of things. My boyfriend gave me spare keys to his apartment in the beginning of our relationship. You know, when we was in the honeymoon stage. I never used it because he always was home and he always opened the door for me. So he kind of forgot I had it, but I sure didn't. So this day, I let myself in. I wanted to see exactly why today he couldn't see me. So I went up to his room and I just hid in the closet. About an hour later, he came home with company. They didn't even watch a movie first. They immediately came to his room. I was peeking through the little closet space and my jaws dropped when I seen it was my best friend. They undressed each other and he slammed her on the bed. Y'all wouldn't believe what happened next. Like for part 3.
Storytime about how my boyfriend broke up with me to marry my mother. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime. It was sent to me on Instagram. Yes, my boyfriend actually did marry my mom. A little backstory on him. He and I had been dating for 6 months. We decided we wanted to move in together, but neither of us had a job. So we ended up moving in with my mother. A little backstory on my mom. Her and I never got along when I was growing up. I mean, it would get to the point where we would throw hands. Every single week she had a new boyfriend. Most of the time her boyfriends would come live with us and she would pay for everything. She even asked me to get a job so that I could help support her and her boyfriend. I started working at a restaurant. And yeah, I helped her pay for bills. I would even buy her boyfriend his beer. When I got accepted into college, I decided I would move out. After that, I barely spoke to my mom. Fast forward to when my boyfriend and I move in with her. She would wear lingerie around the house and constantly flirt with my boyfriend. I had to tell her on several occasions to cover up and just leave him alone. But here's the thing, it never bothered my boyfriend. In fact, he would flirt back. I thought he was just joking. Until a few months passed and he breaks up with me. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my boyfriend broke up with me to marry my mother. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So like I said in part 1, we moved into my mom's house and she was wearing lingerie all the time. And she would constantly flirt with my boyfriend. My boyfriend was having a really hard time finding a job, but luckily I found a job. So I started working as a personal assistant. The problem is that as a personal assistant, you have to be on call almost 24/7. So I was usually never home, and sometimes when I would get home, I'd have to go right back out. This allowed for my mom and my boyfriend to spend a lot of time together by themselves. I would come home and they would be watching movies on the couch together. My mom would always cook him dinner, and then I started finding out stuff. For example, I found out they went to the movies together and they didn't invite me. I only found out because my boyfriend used our joint bank account to pay for the tickets. Sometimes they would order food for themselves and not even offer me any, and they would have beach days. They were spending way too much time together. At first I thought this was good because it meant they got along, but the more my mom dressed provocatively, the more I realized she was trying to seduce him. Then my boyfriend breaks up with me and tells me that I should move out because him and my mom fell in love. Part 3 of how my boyfriend broke up with me to marry my mother. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So one day my boyfriend breaks up with me and tells me that I should move out. When I asked him why, he said that him and my mother fell in love. But since I was already suspecting something, it didn't really surprise me. But of course I was still devastated. That's when he asked me if I could move out that same night. Mind you, I don't have any money or even a place to go to. That's when I run over to my mom's room and guess what? She had locked herself inside. The coward didn't even want to face her own daughter. She told me that the best thing for everyone was for me to move out and that she knew I could get back up on my feet. So I grabbed some of my stuff and I went over to my best friend's house. My best friend invited me to live with her, thank God. A few weeks later, my mom invites me to her wedding with my boyfriend. Or ex, I should say. Last I heard, she's doing OnlyFans, and my ex is living off of her. I have a better job, I'm thriving, and have my own apartment. Storytime about how I caught my husband with his best friend in bed. Who, by the way, is a guy. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I knew that my husband was bi before we got married, and it never bothered me. In fact, that's how we met. A few years ago, I was dating this guy, and we had an open relationship, and he would tell me about this other guy that he was hooking up with. Well, he introduced me to his male friend, and we actually ended up hooking up. A few months later, we became boyfriend and girlfriend, and a few years later, we got married. So I always knew my husband was bi. Here's when his best friend comes into the picture. Let's call him Kenny. Kenny's been best friends with my husband for over 7 years. They've known each other longer than I've known my husband. But get this, Kenny is also married. Kenny would sometimes sleep over our house when it was really late. A few weeks ago, he slept over. I went to bed, but at 4 in the morning, I wake up and my husband is not in bed. So I go looking for him and I hear a noise coming from the guest bedroom. I walk in and see that my husband is tied to the bed. Guess what they were doing? Part 2 is up. I see my husband is tied to the bed and his best friend Kenny is doing things to him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I was so shocked I ran to the toilet and vomited. Kenny went straight to put on his clothes, but my husband was still tied to the damn bed. Before Kenny could start untying him, I straight up started punching my husband in the face, the chest, the neck. I felt uncontrollable rage for the first time. This whole time that I thought they were just best friends, my husband and his male best friend Kenny are hooking up behind my back. Here's when I really started to lose control. Kenny tried to pull me off of my husband, so I noticed that they had a bunch of candles lit. So I grabbed 2 candles and threw them straight at Kenny's head. One of them missed, but the other one got him. So Kenny grabbed his phone and started calling 911. Mind you, my husband is still tied to the bed at this point. Then I grabbed another candle and poured all the hot wax on top of my husband's you-know-what. Part 3 is up. My husband is tied to the bed, so I grabbed the candle and poured all the hot wax on his you-know-what. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Kenny has already called the police at this point and they are on their way. I'm still in blind rage and my husband is still tied to the bed. That's when Kenny grabs me by the hair, takes me to the bathroom and throws me into the tub. I landed on my arm and actually broke it. He goes to untie my husband and that's when the police knock on the door. Well, guess what? They arrested me for assaulting my husband. I sat in a jail cell for 6 hours before my husband came to bail me out. Of course, he apologized and said he would drop the charges. Apparently, Kenny asked his wife for a divorce and is demanding that my husband and I get divorced because he wants to be with my husband. My husband basically said that he doesn't know who to choose, me or him. I really do love my husband. What do I do? Story time about how my dad shot my abusive husband. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My husband and I met through some friends, but I never thought he was attractive or even interesting. But then I heard from other people that he would comment about how beautiful I was, and that's when he started asking me out. I kept saying no because I just didn't like him. But then he reached out to my cousin and asked her to convince me to go out with him. My cousin and I are super close and I always trusted her judgment. So I finally said yes to one date. I was in nursing school at the time, so I was really busy and actually really broke. So he paid for dinner and he even offered to help me pay my bills. I couldn't believe he was being so generous, but obviously at the time I didn't realize that he was just trying to control me. Here's where it gets really scary. 2 months later, he actually took me out on a date, and it was our wedding. That's right, he planned a whole wedding, got my parents' permission and everything. I show up to this date thinking we were gonna have dinner, but then he put me in a freaking wedding gown. I felt like I had no other choice, so I said yes. 2 weeks after we got married, he completely changed. He was totally abusive. He started brainwashing me to not even see my family. Part 2 is up. After my husband forced me into marrying him, he became a totally different person. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. He started brainwashing me into believing that I could never leave him, that no one could ever love me, and he even started convincing me that my family hated me. It was just his way to keep me away from them. But my entire family had enough, especially my dad. My dad was a cop and he had dealt with a lot of abusive husbands in the past. So one night my dad comes to our very big, very beautiful house and he asked my husband to let me go. That's when my husband grabs a bat from behind the door and starts swinging at my...
I met my husband Dave 5 years ago. We've been married for 3 years with a 2-year-old daughter, and I'm currently 4 months pregnant. I met Dave through one of my coworkers, Mark. I started seeing him frequently at the bar we'd go get drinks at after work. He started chit-chatting with me, and it was obvious he was interested, but I tried to decline his advances as gently as I could. He was persistent, and one night, after one too many drinks, I agreed to go on a date with him. I didn't really want to be there, and even thought of canceling, but I was having really bad luck dating at that point, so I decided to go. The date started off really slow, but then I realized we had a lot in common. I was still hesitant, but decided to give Dave a chance. And although he definitely liked me a lot more than I liked him in the beginning, our relationship slowly began to grow and I eventually fell in love with him. Except for the rare couples fights, things between my husband and I have generally been really good. We get along well, and up until last night, I would have said my life is ideal. Since the pandemic, my husband has been working from home. It was a little bit of an adjustment, but it hasn't been too bad. The change in environment has been the biggest issue. To stay connected, my husband meets virtually once a week with his friends and his brother to play games. Last night, he had about 2 to 3 beers while playing with his brother, Tom. I put my daughter to bed to see I had a message from Tom's girlfriend that said they got engaged. Tom had written, "Big thanks to Dave, without whose advice I would never have gotten this far." I immediately ran downstairs to talk to my husband about it. We were cuddling when I mentioned to him about how good of an example he was to his brother, and this is where it all began. Basically, Dave told me about how he helped Tom make his girlfriend fall in love with him just like he did with me. Dave was clearly drunk, but according to him, he first found me on a dating site about half a year before we ever met. He claims he sent me a message, but I just ignored him. And I tried telling him girls receive hundreds of messages and it's hard for us to go through every single one. He then spent hours searching for me on Facebook and LinkedIn. Once he found me, he created numerous social media profiles, some of which I accepted, so then he was able to stalk my life. Purposely found Mark on LinkedIn and befriended him so that he could meet us during happy hour. And that's how we met. That time in my life where I had bad luck dating was all actually Dave under different profiles. I kept chatting with guys who I thought I would have really gotten along with. In some cases, chatted with them for weeks. And then when it was time to meet, I kept getting blown off. It was a huge hit to my self-esteem. One night, after waiting for over an hour for my date to show up, I finally went back to my car and just cried. I didn't understand why this was happening to me. One particularly cruel episode was when I was supposed to go on a date with one of Dave's fake profiles, and I received a text message saying he's not coming because I didn't look as good as my pictures and I was accused of catfishing him. The next week was when I finally agreed to go on a date with Dave. Dave even went as far as hiring aspiring models to go on dates with me to break my spirits. I hit it off with one guy who was extremely handsome and went on an amazing date just for him to look me in the eyes and say, "Sorry, I'm not into sluts." He got up and he walked away. Dave told me he paid him $1,000 to crush my spirits. I don't know what to do, or even if there's anything to do. I am horrified and absolutely shocked at what I learned. But some part of me has to admit that I'm also flattered. Would a man spend so much time and effort just to be with me? Although creepy, it does seem a bit romantic. Maybe? No, it's not romantic. This is grade A stalker level obsessive movie horror shit where he's gonna kill you in your sleep. No. Run away.